artists, welcome back to Art with Miss Wegman from home. What we're going to be doing this week is we're going to be learning about an artist named Claude Monet. He was a French painter who was part of a group of artists known as the Impressionists. What Impressionists did when they painted is they painted with lots of quick, moving paint strokes that really were trying to show what the light looked like rather than making the object look realistic. For example, you can see some of his paintings here. They have a lot of up-close little paint strokes like that. Okay, this was one that he did of some beautiful gardens. But if I go back over to this painting right here, he's most famous for his paintings of the water lilies in some of the gardens. He would go there and set up a paintbrush and easel and actually bring his stuff outside with him. They didn't really have cameras like we do today. Today, we could easily take pictures of something, bring the photos home, and do a painting in the comfort of our own home. But he liked to really get out there and paint exactly what he was seeing in front of him and capture it just like a photograph, but a painting. So he is most well known for his paintings of water lilies. I'll show you another one here. All right, this is one called the Water Lily Pond. Let me bring that up close so you guys can really see it. You can see all the different flowers. Now, water lilies are a special type of flower where the flower sits on top of a lily pad. You may have heard of a lily pad before because that's something often that we think of when we think of what a frog might be sitting on when he lives. So what we're going to do for our project this week is we're going to be making a water lily garden. Now, this paper is really big, I know. It's about double the size of a piece of our regular drawing paper. This is what we would have done if we were still in school. Now, if you have paper this big, you can definitely make it this big. But for the sake of this video, and for what I know most of you have at home, we are going to make our lily pad painting, or drawing, or coloring, whatever you have at home, here on the smaller piece of paper. We're going to hold the paper horizontally. Remember, that means the paper is going side to side. Okay? This is holding the paper vertically. We would use this for things like portraits or drawings of people. But since we're doing a landscape or a water lily garden, we're going to hold our paper horizontally. Remember to practice those art words. Horizontal goes side to side, vertical goes up and down. All right, so let's get started. First thing we're going to do is we are going to draw our water lilies. Now, you can make your water lilies whatever color you want, but normally there's some sort of red or pink or magenta type of color. So I actually pulled out red violet and carnation pink for my flowers. And I don't want all of my lily pads to look exactly the same, so I pulled out green and yellow green. Now, if you don't have these colors, if you only have green, that's totally fine. Again, use what you have, all right? I'm going to start off first by drawing my water lily flowers, and I'll add the lily pads around them. I'm going to put just a few of them, maybe like 3 or 4 if I feel like fitting that. I'm going to start by putting one up here in the corner. When I draw my water lily, I'm going to start off with a big U shape, make it kind of wide, like a big goofy smile. And then along the top of my water lily, I'm going to draw what kind of line is this? I'll give you a second. Zigzag line, for any of you who said that. I'm going to draw a zigzag line across the top. Now I'm going to pick up one of my greens, and I'm going to use that to add my water lily. I'm going to color everything in at the end. I'm going to start on the side of my water lily, either side. And I'm going to draw a curved line that goes around. Now, a lot of water lilies have a little notch or a little gap in them like that. So it's kind of like the top of a triangle. And then I'll go back around and touch there. Let's add a few more. I'm going to do another one right here. I'm going to do again, smile, zigzag. And since I made this one dark green, I'm going to make this one light green. But I'm going to put my little notch on this side instead. I'm going to go around my lily. And I think that I should be able to fit 4 lilies. I might make one of them a little bit smaller. So again, smiles and zigzags. And let's put one more up here. I'm not going to put it right up in the corner. I'm going to use this space right here. Okay, got my lily. And my lily pad. All right, so I have my lilies drawn in. Now it's time to color them. Now, remember when you're coloring, we're not coloring the one whole big paper. So your arms should not be moving back and forth like that. Big coloring for a big space, but these are little spaces. So we want to use little coloring for little spaces, okay? Make sure you're holding your crayon correctly, okay? Just like you would hold a pencil with your pincher fingers. Like that. You shouldn't be holding them like this or like this. Holding your crayon here, not too close to the end, because if you press too hard it might break. So holding your crayon just like a pencil. And I am going to color in all of my lilies. Now this is very important, especially if you're going to be painting the water for your lily flowers. You want to really fill in your lily flowers and make sure that there is little to no white space showing. This is especially important because what we're going to do is once we add the watercolor paint on top of it, and it has to be watercolor paint, it can't be acrylic or tempera, that way if you use that you're just gonna end up going right on top of your lilies and we don't want to do that. Now while I'm holding the light pink, I'm going to jump down to this lily. Color this one in, but you want to make sure, like I was explaining before, that you fill in all of those white spaces, because when you take watercolor paint on top of crayon, it doesn't stick to the crayon. Now before I give you the answer, I want you to think about it. Why might crayon not stick? Why might paint not stick to crayon? What is in a crayon that the water can't stick to? Think about it. Crayons are made of wax. They have wax in them. And what happens if you've ever taken a candle, okay, or if you have a candle in your house, if you were to run that candle under some water, the water's just going to beat up and roll right off of it. It cannot go through wax. So if we color something really, really dark, I don't want to say color hard, because if you color too hard, you might accidentally break the crayons, and we don't want to do that. But if you go on top of wax with water or watercolor paint, it's going to roll right off of it. I'm going to turn my paper this way so you guys can see what I'm doing. And I am going to color in the rest of my lily flowers. So take your time. I am going a little bit quicker because I've had a lot of practice with this, but I want you to give me your very best coloring. It is May, and that is what I do expect from my kindergartners. See, now I went outside the lines there. I made a little bit of an oops, but look how I can fix it. I can simply draw another little line, make my flower a little bit bigger. Look at that. And that's how you can fix an oops. Even the art teacher makes mistakes. And now I'm going to do the same thing for my lilies. And there you go. So that is step one, drawing and coloring in as neatly as possible the lily flowers. You want to make sure all those white spaces are filled in. It's okay if there's still a few here and there, but just be aware that when you paint on top of it, you might be able to see some of the paint through the lily flower. If I bring out my example, you can see my lily flowers here. Here I then really color it all the way in with the green, so some of my water's poking through, but that's okay. If you want your flowers to pop out, you want to make sure that you don't leave too many big white spaces just in case. All right, now it's time to create the water underneath our water lilies. And in this case, when we paint, it's going to be completely okay to paint right on top of our flowers, because as long as you colored them with crayon, the paint should roll right off of them. I'm going to show you a couple different ways that you can do the water using regular watercolor paints, and I'm going to show you a really cool trick that I learned where if you don't have watercolor paints, but you do have a paintbrush and some water-based markers, you could make your markers work for you like paint. Now, if you don't have either one of these supplies, that's totally fine. You could use regular markers if you don't have a paintbrush to just color your water. You could just color your water with crayon, colored pencil, whatever it is that you have. If you don't have the ability to paint with this, it's okay. You can just color it in. Draw, color, and give me your best, neatest work. But let's try some of this paint. So I have some basic watercolor paints here. Now for my water, I'm going to use mostly blue, but I am going to put a few touches of purple in there. I'm going to use my regular watercolor paint kind of more near this top area here. Wet my brush, okay? Remember, when you're wetting your brush, you don't want to tap because you're going to end up flinging water all over your house. And even though we're not in art and you're going to be flinging water on your neighbor, I'm not really sure your parents are going to like that you're flinging water all over the house. So you always wipe the extra water off of your brush. I'm going to do that. Get a little bit of this blue. Now, since our paper is horizontal, you should be using horizontal paint strokes. Now, I didn't even put more paint on my paintbrush there. I'm just adding more water. Where I have more water, it actually gets a little lighter. Then if I start to run out of color, I can add a little bit more. And you want to be careful. I'm using just regular drawing paper, so you can already see that the corners of my paper are starting to curl a little bit. That happens. If you have watercolor paper or something a little bit thicker, then you might have an easier time painting. I'm getting a little nervous here because I'm getting close to my flower, but let's try it. Look at that. Look at that. When I go right across it, it's going to bead up a little bit on top of your flowers. That's totally okay. But it basically stays off. It's almost like the wax in the crayon is saying, no, you shall not pass. Okay. Now I'm doing mostly blue, but you can have a little bit of fun with your water. Maybe I might want to throw a little dash of purple in there. No, there's not usually purple in water, but we can have a little fun with this. We can use our imaginations a little bit. So not too much. Something like that. All right. Now that is how you could do this with regular watercolor. I'm going to give my brush a good rinse. And I want to take a second and show you how you can turn these markers into paint for you. So the only thing you're really going to need for this is you're going to need a piece of foil and whatever color markers you're going to be using. I'm going to use, I have a blue, I have a turquoise, which would be a nice change. And I do have this royal purple color. It seems to be kind of a bluish purple, and since I put a little purple in my water up there, I'm going to give it a try. Now on my foil, I'm going to scribble down some marker, a little bit of my blue, some turquoise, that royal purple. That's going to look really nice in there. Take my paintbrush. Here we go. And you have instant watercolor paint from your markers. And a little bit goes a long way. Look at that. Bounces right off of it, just like my watercolor paints did too. Give it a good rinse. Try adding some of this turquoise in there. That looks really pretty. I like that a lot. I'm actually going to switch my paint brushes. I want to use a slightly bigger brush and see if that makes a difference. Now, I only put down a little bit of marker, but even just by adding some water to it, it's making a lot of paint. Oh, that's much better. Here's my turquoise. Now remember, when you're painting, you don't want to make puddles, all right? We don't want our paper to get soaked, because what happens if our paper gets too wet? It's gonna rip. We definitely don't want that to happen to our painting. Also, since you're working at home, and I'm sure mom or whoever it is that you're home with will appreciate this, you want to make sure that you're protecting the surface that you're working on. So I actually put down a piece of wax paper just to protect my dining room table. All right, I know that sometimes when I paint, I have a tendency to go off the paper every now and then, and don't really want to paint my dining room table purple. So make sure that you're being careful, you're being mindful of your space. Also make sure that you're watching where you're putting your arms and stuff. You don't want to paint yourself, you want to paint your painting. These markers are going a really long way. I haven't had to add any more. This is great. We should probably use this for way more projects. What a great idea. Okay, and it's gonna bounce right off. I could go whoop right across my flowers and nothing happens. Try it again, whoop, nothing happens. Now you may get a little bit that beads up on the flowers, but that's okay. Take your brush, scribble that around. It's all part of the process. It doesn't mean your painting's ruined. It's showing me that you tried something new. And look at that, except for the fact that my blue marker is a little bit lighter than my blue watercolor, you can't even tell the difference between the two top corners. A little darker up here, but I'm gonna make sure I add a little bit of that turquoise up here to even it out. A little bit of that blue. And this looks just about done. Now I'm leaving some white spaces with my water. Doesn't have to be perfect. Put my brush, and there you go. How cool is that? So you want to make sure that you let this dry, find a safe place to keep your artwork, all right? And then take a picture and send it to me. But look at that. So you have a lot of options. You could use regular watercolor paint, or you can try our new trick with the markers. The only thing about the markers is you just have to make sure that they are water-based. So things like Sharpies, permanent markers are not going to work with this. If you put water on a permanent marker, nothing's going to happen. So they have to be water-based. These are Crayola, but any other water-based marker should do. Mr. Sketch is another really good brand, but just make sure it's water-based, washable markers, things like that will get all watery and paint-like when you add water to them. All right. And there you have it. That's how you can make your very own water lily painting, just like Claude Monet. But remember, just like I explained in the demo, you can use whatever supplies you have at home. If you don't have watercolor paints, you can just do yours with crayon. Or maybe you want to make your flowers with crayon and do your water with markers. And don't forget to try, if you can, that really cool trick I showed you where you can actually make your markers into paints. Who knew, right? That's crazy. Either way, have fun, use what you have, and just do your best work. Especially now at this point in the year, you should be giving me your very best coloring, so make sure to try and stay inside those lines. And take a picture of your artwork and send it to me so I can give you a grade. I cannot wait to see your beautiful water lily creations, and I miss you all so much. See you again soon.